Welcome to the Vocation of the Business Leader podcast. I'm Greg Balster. Here we explore how Catholic leaders let Christ and the teachings of the church he founded guide their work, integrating faith and business. Each episode offers inspiring stories to help you live an undivided life. Thank you for joining us. Let's meet our guest, Leah Jacobson, founder and CEO of the Guiding Star Project. Welcome, Leah.
Thanks. Good morning. Good morning.
Morning.
Nice to see you.
Would you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah. I'm a Catholic wife of 21 years now, and I have 7 children, and I live in north central Minnesota. So I'm up in the rural area of Minnesota in the lakes area. It's beautiful here. It's great place to call home. I was born and raised on a dairy farm in central Minnesota.
Dairy farm's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work. Yes, I think that's probably where my work ethic came from, is that you are used to doing really dirty tasks at all hours of the day and night, and that's just life. You get used to it. So it's a good preparation for entrepreneurship and leadership.
Yeah. So you got a lot of stuff going on. And so when you were, off of your LinkedIn, that you were a Catholic campus minister at the University of Minnesota in Duluth. So tell me about, have you always been this bold in your faith?
Yeah, that's actually a really great question. I do think that I have somewhat the gift of faith in terms of that I've never had a real moment of crisis in terms of, do I believe? I've always believed. So I think that I have been bold in that way, that I just, my baseline assumption is that God exists and God is good and God loves me. So that's a pretty good place to start from. I think that's a pretty bold assumption in our current day and culture. So I guess maybe, yeah. I mean, I went to a Catholic elementary school and public high school, and then I ended up at a public university. And it was when I was first starting out as a freshman at the University of Minnesota Duluth. That was kind of the first time I ever lived in a town. Like I said, I lived on a dairy farm. And that was kind of a shock, I guess, to see, wow, most people really didn't grow up with the same morals, ideals for, worldview that I grew up in, surrounded by a lot of family, a lot of nature, a lot of what I would call natural order, I think. And that did awaken something in me that made me even more bold, I think, in my faith as a college student, where I just could see so many people hurting and making really bad choices, and knowing that is not going to fulfill your heart. I know what you're searching for. I know what you want, but that's not it. And so I actually was a freshman at the University of Minnesota Duluth, and was on track to graduate a bit early, and I met and fell in love with a great guy, and we were engaged to be married. And we approached the bishop of our diocese actually when we were engaged and said, would you hire us as campus ministers? We knew that the priest would be moving out soon, that he was being reassigned to a new place. And we knew there was no priest that would be living in the home. And it had always been a priest's residence. There had never been lay campus ministers there. And somehow, must have been the work of the Holy Spirit interceding, but our Bishop Dennis Schnurr, saw something, and he took a chance on us. And so he hired me as the first ever lay campus minister for the Diocese of Duluth, Minnesota. And we moved into the house shortly after our wedding when we were barely 22 years old, and took over the campus ministry program there, and spent the first 3 years of our marriage living and working with students. And it was welcomed our first 2 babies while we lived in that house with a bunch of college students around us. And it was just a really great start, I think, to ministry, and having that so firmly entrenched in our marriage and in our life and what we were going to do.
Yeah. So tell us about what you experienced when you spoke to the college females that were so confused.
Yeah, I mean, it was actually really disorienting. Like I said, my freshman year of college, living in the dorms and realizing that this hookup culture wasn't just something on MTV. I kind of thought it was not real. I'd never really actually seen it for myself in my high school. You didn't really see that. Maybe it was happening, but it was committed couples, and you didn't really see that. But when I got into the dorms at UMD and I began to see, there is a really prevalent hookup culture. And that's the first time I ever encountered a young woman that was that had an abortion. A girl lived across the hallway, had an abortion our freshman year of college. And just those real heavy things started to hit me there. And yeah, that boldness and that passion really grew where I wanted them to know the truth. I just wanted them to know the truth that you don't need to be reliant on contraception. You don't need to be hooking up with these guys in the first place. Like, you can find loving relationships. There are good men. Men don't have to act like animals. You don't have to give them whatever they want. Like, you can call them to a higher place. And so most of our conversations, when I became a campus minister and I was newly married, they were very open. I was, telling them all about natural family planning and how that practically works in a marriage. And we were kind of an open book to all the students on campus, my husband and I. They were asking us very intimate questions about, their relationships and dating. And is this like compatible with a Catholic worldview and lifestyle? And a lot of times we just had to very bluntly say, listen, you need to get to confession and start over. Like, this is not a good relationship for you. It was a lot of relationship advising.
Yeah.
But the women in particular, your question was about the women. And I had a great sadness the more that I talked with the women, just what they didn't know. And I credit maybe my knowledge, not so much to the church teaching it to me. Like, I won't say that I was expertly catechized or something like that. I wasn't, it was more so that I grew up on a farm. I grew up surrounded by life and death and fertility and just seeing, like, quite literally the birds and the bees, in front of me all the time. So I had from a very young age, an understanding of fertility and fertility cycles and how life works. And as that, translates into humans and human relationships, there's some very real natural order truths that when you violate them, you have bad consequences. And so a lot of my conversations with the girls were about, your body's not the problem. The relationship is the problem. Like, God made your body a certain way. It's the fact that you don't have a relationship that respects that. That's really the problem right now. And so that was a lot of our conversations was trust God in this moment, that your body was made to do this. It was made to ovulate. It was made to gestate. It was made to lactate. These are very beautiful natural functions of your body, and we're going to protect them as best we can. And it was very revolutionary. And it was kind of like this almost feminist sort of approach of, we're not the problem. Society's the problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so you saw this hurt. And when did the idea of the Guiding Star project come along?
Yeah, that was kind of out of nowhere, honestly. I wasn't expecting to do that. I was getting this like passion and all this experience. And I actually thought when I left campus ministry, we moved out after we had we were expecting our second baby, within 3 years. And so the house was getting too small. It was pretty clear we needed to move out. We moved out. Father Mike Schmitz moved in immediately after we moved out. So that was kind of a fun crossover of our work. And I thought maybe I should go back to school to become a nurse midwife. I thought, maybe that's the best way I can serve these women in the pro-life movement is to deliver their babies. Like, I'll become a midwife. And so I actually applied for and was accepted into nursing school. And I was planning to start midwifery school. And I went to adoration one night at the Star of the Sea Adoration Chapel in Duluth, Minnesota. It was 3 weeks before class was set to start. And I have 2 little boys, toddlers, and I'm sitting in adoration. And I, for the only time in my life, heard audibly, like, an audible like word from God, and it was one word, and it was simply the word no. And I was like, okay, no, what does that mean? Like, so what?
No, yeah, a little bit more.
But yeah, I know. So then I sat there for 3 hours and I pulled out my prayer journal and notebook and I just started kind of writing, and God just slowly kind of unveiled this vision of, what do you, as a young woman, as a young mother living in our culture, like, what do you want for yourself, for your friends, for your sisters? Like, what is it that you need? And it was this vision of a comprehensive, women's healthcare facility that really pulled together aspects of a pregnancy resource center for support, and then a natural alternative birthing center, for birth services, lactation consulting, fertility care. And it was like just pulling together all these different like resources that I was tapping into, but like struggling to find because they were so spread out and disintegrated. Like, you couldn't get them all to work together because they all came from such different places. And that's what came forward that evening in adoration, was this idea of doing women's healthcare better in such a way that no woman would ever fear her body or fear pregnancy. Yeah. So it literally never came from me. It was one night in
Yeah.
adoration where I was like, okay, here we go. I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah. So what was it like trying to organize this, and what were the challenges?
Well, I didn't know what I was doing. That was probably the biggest challenge. Um, Being a mom, open to life and welcoming children was definitely a challenge at this point in life because this vision came when I had two children under the age of three. And now I have seven. And so I welcomed five more children, throughout the growth of this project. I also completed my master's degree in women's health and wellness. My husband also completed his master's degree as a family nurse practitioner. And so we just had a lot going on, like school, education, raising children. We homeschooled our kids there for a period of time. There was just a lot of education happening at that point in life. But it was good because I was able to focus what I was learning in a very specific direction. I was able to say, what is my end goal here? I want to have centers that make us the expert in women's healthcare. What should I personally be doing? I should be becoming an expert in women's healthcare issues. And so it was all very like converging. It was all working together at the same time where everything I was learning and getting credit for with my master's was working towards this growing of a national movement and a vision. I didn't understand either when I first received the vision that this would go beyond Duluth, Minnesota. I thought it was one center. I thought it was one project in Duluth, Minnesota. And within about 3 years of working and getting that nonprofit set up and started, I was just learning nonprofit 101, as a 25-year-old young mom. How do you start a nonprofit? What do you do? What's a board of directors for? How do you raise money? What are grants? All that stuff. I was just learning it slowly and figuring it out. Because then after a period of time, it became clear that this is actually not probably for Duluth. This is a national initiative. And when that sort of realization hit, it was, oh my gosh, like you duped me, Lord. Like I felt like I had been duped. Like, I don't know, I would have started this, Jesus, had you told me.
Yeah. What did you, when you went to college, what were you originally wanting to do?
My undergraduate degree was in psychology. And I just thought, I'm going to college for the experience of college. I'll hopefully meet my husband. I did. And I had thought about going back for a master's maybe in counseling, but you know, I wasn't committed to any career path. I was committed to, marriage, family, motherhood. Pretty content with that too, knowing that I wanted to spend a lot of time volunteering and being active in the community. But I didn't think it would actually culminate in a business. I wasn't thinking that that's what I was set for, but it was just coming so clearly like to me that this is something I'm compelled to do. I am miserable when I do not do it because the Lord is like continually like assaulting my peace. Like, do this, do this. And then the fruits of it were undeniable. It was one of those moments where you're like, well, should I be doing this? I have young children. Should I be spending my time in this way? And I didn't have my own initial desire for it. It was just a call upon my life. It was this like insatiable sort of like, I can't not do this. And I had a spiritual director kind of advise me early on in the process and just said, just take the next step. The next step. If it bears fruit, continue. And that's always kind of been my mantra. Like the Lord will provide if he wants it to happen. And if he doesn't want it to happen, he will shut it down. And every step along the way, the fruits have almost been supernatural. Like they've been beyond what they should be when I'm on the right path. And so when we go the right way, it just sort of goes. And that's kind of been my guiding principle. So I shared at Sent when I spoke there that we really launched out without a business plan. It was very much like, Lord, this is the vision that you gave. This is what you pulled forth that we need for women. This is what young women need in order to choose life confidently in this culture. We don't know how to do it. And there's probably 1,000 ways to do it. So make clear to us how to do it. And that's really been the last, 10 to 15 years has been piloting all the different ways that it's possible to do it. We've opened centers now, probably 5 different ways, like 5 different pathways of, for-profit into nonprofit sitting alongside for-profit, pure nonprofits, and like a collaboration with one another, almost like a co-op. We've done it several ways, and some of them have worked well and some have not. And now I'm kind of getting to the maturity now in my business venture that I didn't really set out on purpose to recognize this is what works now and this is what we're going to do. So the organization has been maturing and growing. And we're at a really exciting point.
Yeah. So you have 8 centers, correct?
Yeah, right now we have 7 locations. We actually just closed one in Memphis, Tennessee. So it actually kind of morphed into something else. So we have 7 centers right now in 5 states.
Yeah. So, yeah. So in 5 states. So how did that, I mean, in Texas and
Yep.
yeah, Iowa and Florida and so,
Minnesota. Yeah, like I said, a little bit accidentally in terms of that we sort of just launched out. This was a Holy Spirit guided thing. And it was the first thing that I did when I started the NAT, when I realized it was supposed to go beyond Minnesota, when I realized like this is bigger than one community. We put a website up in 2012, and all it was a can we do better for women's healthcare question. That's literally all the website was. And then it had the vision. It had like a floor plan actually of like what one of these centers would look like. It had all the elements of the center in one location. And like I said, the supernatural fruits just sort of like that should not have caught fire, but it caught fire. That should not have caught so much interest all around the country, but all of a sudden we had emails coming in and phone calls coming in from all over the country, Tampa, Florida, El Paso, Texas, like just random weird places, Cedar Valley, Iowa, saying we want to open one of these centers. How do we do it? And it was us saying, we're not sure. Let's figure it out.
yeah.
And
So,
so
so these were just brand new centers that you weren't like starting,
well, and that when I said there's 5 or so different ways we did it,
yeah.
that's one of the differences. A couple of them were pre-existing pregnancy resource centers. So the one in El Paso, Texas existed for about 15 years as a pregnancy center called House of Hope. And so we actually went through a whole kind of conversion, a DBA at first, converting and like taking over and basically converting an existing nonprofit into a new nonprofit that's now Guiding Star Southwest. So that one had a completely different, kind of history than the ones in Iowa. All 3 of them in Iowa ended up being completely from scratch, brand new nonprofit organizations that we filed in under our national group exemption. So our IRS group exemption, we started them up from scratch, trained these new boards of directors, had to do their first fundraisers, had to do everything, to start them up as a new organization. So those are some of the differences. And that's what I've been learning for the past decade. And my team has been learning is what are good practices for nonprofits? How do we identify a good partner? If they already exist, what's the foundation that needs to be in place for them to be successful? Because we also learned along the way that not every pregnancy center has a good foundation. Not every pregnancy center can grow into a full medical practice. That's a huge ask. That's a big growth. And we had a few along the way that we started and quickly realized that's not a fit. This is not going to work, and then a disaffiliation took place. So there has been a steep learning curve for us to figure out what works, what doesn't.
So tell the audience the concept and the mission of the Guiding Star Project.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So we work to create a healthcare system, a community through education resources, healthcare resources, one convenient location, a brick and mortar location in a community that provides our 4 core services. And our 4 core services are focused on women's healthcare, specifically women's healthcare and the functions of a female body. And so we work on, so I mentioned earlier, just ovulation, gestation, lactation. Those are kind of what we call the 3 female superpowers. And so our first 3 of our core services are focused on natural fertility, childbirth, and breastfeeding. And so all of our centers offer those services to women. And then the 4th core service is really what we call family life or motherhood. And it's all the things, including a drop-in child watch, including resources that you might see more in a pregnancy center, clothing, diapers, breast pumps, things like that. And we put it all together in one convenient location so that any woman who is, trying to learn about her natural body, her fertility, that she could come in the door there. Any woman who's pregnant, whether or not she's happy about it or not happy about it, she could come in the door there and get her prenatal care. As we're moving now into birth centers, that's been the real evolution of our organization. We've realized we need to be able to do birth on site. That's been something we've learned over the last 10 years, that birth is such an important, sacred moment, and it can be very traumatic, and it can really affect women's openness to life. that we need to be providing the best birth experience as possible. So we're opening alternative birth centers right on site in our centers. And then really great postpartum follow-up care with lactation support and all the postpartum care these women need. And then our services really do go far beyond. I mean, a girl can come in as young as age 9 and experience our cycle show, fertility education, start learning about how her body should naturally work. And she could stay all the way through menopause and come through age 99, so it's really the place where you should be getting your women's health care throughout your lifespan.
Right. Good, solid information. Yeah, that's excellent. So you are on your website, you state that you want to grow to 50 centers nationwide.
We do.
So how are you going to do that?
This is the exciting part, Greg. That's what I'm saying. We're finally kind of at that moment where we've been realizing this works okay, this doesn't work. And what we've really recognized is the franchise. We're moving into the franchise option. And so that's exactly what our organization is preparing right now as our franchise agreements. Our existing centers were kind of, grandfathered into, we're just making it work. We're figuring out how that works because they've been such trailblazing pioneers for us. They have shown, they've proven the concept that this is what women need. And we can see from the work that has happened in these communities that have run a center that they have the exact effect that we want these centers to have. And some of them have had just crazy success in their communities. I just have to brag for a second on our center in El Paso, Texas. They, like I said, I think they're one of the better data sources because they pre-existed as a pregnancy center for 15 years, and they were a successful pregnancy center. When they began to add guiding star services in 2017, we started adding fertility care. They started adding some prenatal support, started adding breastfeeding care. And we saw that the abortion rate, they had 2 abortion clinics in El Paso, the abortion rate started to slowly drop. And by 2020, both clinics had closed. So both abortion clinics had closed, and our patient rate just skyrocketed. And this was before the Texas heartbeat law went in to play. So we closed 2 abortion clinics in one city. Wow. Just by giving better care to the women. Yeah. So I know it works. We know it works.
Yeah. Yeah. Yet most women that walk into a Planned Parenthood, they don't know what they're walking into.
No, they think they're going there for, even the women that are opposed to abortion, they come in there because they're getting their well woman exam, or they're getting some other service that they think is, not morally reprehensible. Like maybe they would never go to get an abortion, but they don't realize that they're walking into this very slippery slope of, let's just get you started on it looks like your cycle is a little bit off. Let's start an oral contraception. Oh, don't worry. It's not for birth control purposes. It's to regulate your cycle. And so it's just very easy to start, kind of slowly moving more and more towards this model of women's healthcare that says the way that we treat women is suppressing their body, altering their fertility, and making them the problem. Whereas we will never do that. A woman coming into our center is going to be told right away, hey, you know what? Your cycle's a little bit irregular. Let's run some hormone panels. Let's figure out what's going on. Let's fix the root problem here instead of putting you on an oral contraceptive for no reason. We're not going to put you on contraceptives because you have acne. That's ridiculous. But yet that's Planned Parenthood's game plan. Whatever we can do to get you on an oral contraceptive or long-acting contraceptive, whatever we can do, we're going to do it. And it's a smart business model for them because they get reimbursed an awful lot of money for those services, whereas we don't get reimbursed very much for teaching women how to understand their bodies. So it's a huge battle in terms of we've picked the business model with very low returns.
High returns up high.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I mean, we're not going to make the things that make money in women's healthcare are very destructive things. It's hysterectomies, it's tubal ligations, it's oral contraceptions, it's IUDs. We don't do any of those things. So it's definitely an uphill battle, but we think that if we continue to really help women, empower women, demand a higher level of care, that's a big part of our strategy. And we do a lot of publishing, a lot of speaking. We talk a lot about this is the care you deserve. Like you need to demand a different level of care. And it's starting to catch on. We're seeing this younger generation of women, all the phones, the apps for tracking cycles, like they're all starting to really take off. Women are expecting their doctor to know the basics about a fertile cycle, which is new. I mean, 20 years ago, that was not an expectation.
Yeah. And on your website, I noticed you have the Guiding Star Academy.
Yeah.
So tell us
Yep.
about that.
That's exactly what that effort is for. It's that education, that pre-education that's required. Because when you bring a new product to market that nobody even knows the need for it, like they're sort of like, okay, well, I don't need that. And we're having to tell women, no, you do need and deserve a higher level of care. And so it's that place to interact with women that maybe themselves didn't receive good care, but want it for their daughters. A lot of the resources in the academy, which is free, anybody can join it. A lot of it is guides on how to have a conversation with your daughter about her first period, how to talk with your daughter that is on contraception, or a lot of these things like that, or why maybe you should consider something other than an IUD. It's a lot of that sort of resourcing to really just reframe women's healthcare into the expectation that women's healthcare is preserving and honoring the natural female body, optimizing its health, not altering, suppressing, and destroying it. That should never be called healthcare. I definition wise, like that's truly what really a misogyny. That is misogyny. If we want to talk about hatred of women, it's taking the unique healthy functions of their body and destroying them.
Right.
So
Totally.
we're working very hard through our academy to reframe that. And I like to think it's starting to work. We're starting to see some little, pro-life kind of holistic feminist action happening. Women starting to say, I don't want that. So.
Yeah. Yeah. The Holy Spirit's working. So as a CEO, what do you focus on?
Yeah, right now I'm really, really focused on a lot of things. I'm trying to okay, what's the thing I want to tell you right now? I have a great president alongside me. So my president, Lisa Canning, we use the system EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, which is one of the things, and I know that we share a connection through Scent. Scent Ventures is our connection, which is one of the things that came to me through Scent. The EOS model of running a company was something I learned in Scent. And so we implemented that in Guiding Star about 3 years ago. So I sit in the visionary seat as a CEO, and Lisa Canning, my president, sits in the integrator seat. And so my job, as a classic kind of visionary is, connecting us to keeping a pulse on what's happening and making sure that we're connected in the right places nationally to be really growing and expanding this. I'm working hard right now on our key stakeholders staying involved and invested in our work, that they know what's going on and what's coming, because this is kind of a relaunch moment for us as we move into franchising, as we move away from this affiliate model where we just sort of take anybody and say, okay, we'll figure it out. And now we're saying, no, this is what it looks like to work with us. And this is what you actually need. We're stepping forward and basically saying, no, these are the providers and the service agreements that need to be in place in order for this to work, in order for this to be a Guiding Star Center. And so I'm leading through a time of transition, I guess, is really what I'm doing. Just clearly and repeatedly saying, this is where we're going, and this is how we get there. And so my president gets to do a lot of the nuts and bolts kind of, day-to-day employee management and business plan writing and all that fun stuff. But I'm really right alongside her to make sure that we stay on course with our vision, that we end up at the right spot.
And since you don't have much going on, that you're doing this graduate certificate in sexuality and gender at the University of St. Thomas in Houston. So tell us about that.
Because God's really awesome. He has a good sense of humor. The opportunity came to actually this last year, the University of St. Thomas in Houston, which is an incredible school. It's actually listed in the Newman Guide of Catholic universities in the country that are faithful to the teachings of the magisterium, which is an important distinction when you're talking about the issues that I'm dealing with, which are sexuality and gender and women's studies. The opportunity came that they wanted to start a master's program in women and gender studies. And I was recruited to help lead that initiative. And so for the past year, we've been getting it all accredited and through all the approval processes. And we launched this fall with our first cohort of students. Our first class started in August. And so they're on their way to being the very first ever Catholic women and gender studies graduates ever. This is a new concept. It's never existed anywhere. And it's just really based on a lot of what I've been talking about, that there are natural law things that we can't avoid when we're talking about issues of gender. There are realities that are presented to us anthropologically, theologically, biologically, emotionally, that if we ignore them, we're just fighting reality. And so it fits nicely for me. I feel the work that I've been doing with Guiding Star has really been the proof of concept that when you acknowledge a woman's body and you care for it properly, she's happy, she's whole, she feels good. And that's really what this program is, academically backing up and saying, here's the research, here's the studies. These are not just, ideas that are fluid that we can change. Like there is some objective truth that needs to be observed. And so it's been a lot of fun working with the different professors to create the classes and to create the curriculum. And I'm really proud of what we've created. It's pretty awesome.
The first gender study that's actually teaching the truth.
Yeah, yep. And people have been a little bit, put off by the title because they're like, oh, feminism, gender studies. But the
Right.
thing is these concepts like gender is something that we should be as Catholics leaning into and saying, what does the church teach about this? Where is the church's guidance? What does it have to say? And then presenting it. And that's what has to happen. And that's what we're doing right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So what advice would you have to a Catholic professional out there that's living a divided life? Their faith and work. Obviously, they don't need to go preach, but what advice would you have for them to live an undivided life?
Yeah, and this is the interesting part, because even though, I've been fairly bold with my faith, I've never like hidden the fact that I'm Catholic. It's always kind of been part of who I am in terms of my bio. It's in my background. I was a campus minister as Catholic. You can pretty quickly realize I'm Catholic if you look anywhere. However, I don't feel in any way that that has diminished my expert opinion and my expertise, as I did my master's in women's health and wellness and became a board certified lactation consultant. And in my field, I've been welcomed and been able to conduct research and speak at secular conferences. And it's not been a problem. You don't have to lead with, well, I'm Catholic, so XYZ. You just teach the truth, preach the truth. Like there is no apology for the truth. Like you can confidently say, this is true, and this is the evidence that is provided. Like that's the beautiful part about being Catholic, is that everything we believe is backed up by the reality of God's creation in nature and science. If we just look for it, the evidence is there to back up the position. And so I've found that there really is no reason to be divided. I feel very undivided because I don't have to lead with that I'm a Catholic. That's not how you live an undivided life. You just stay in order with God. And that's a very palatable message for anybody of reason. And then the other thing I would say is in my own organization, we don't hire only Catholics. We'll hire anybody that's really on board with us. But for the Catholics that I do hire and that I work closely with, I just am very clear and I ask them, I say, please stay in a state of grace. Like, I need you to stay in a state of grace. I need you to make Mass and confession a priority in your life, because if we're going to do this thing together, we need to remove all obstacles of the enemy, all distractions, all noise. So please stay in a state of grace. And that's really something that I kind of screen for in my interview process of, what's your faith life like? Are you going to have the strength to weather some of these storms? Because you're about to walk into probably the biggest storm of your life. You're walking into the pro-life movement and into the gender studies battle. So, and women's healthcare. So have fun. This is going to be a ride.
Yep. That spiritual warfare is real.
And it is intense in these areas.
Absolutely. So how can people best support the Guiding Star Project?
Yeah, we're always looking for prayer support for sure. Please, like I was just saying, this is an intense spiritual battle. Please pray for the protection of all of our centers. We have had, attacks on locations and people that are just very hostile. So pray for our staff, our employees, protection everywhere on every location. But in this particular moment, it's just a really exciting time as we completely shift our business model. We're looking for everything from, investors in real estate, people that have a lot of franchise experience, healthcare administration. We're looking to fill some key seats in our organization. And we're always welcoming advisors, board of director members. So people can come alongside us right now. It's kind of a really interesting moment. It's a great opportunity to kind of come in at a relaunch of proven concept at the ground level, though. So if someone's feeling that call, please reach out to us. We would really love to hear from you.
Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you'd like to talk about?
No, I mean, I feel like we had a great conversation, Greg. I feel kind of bad I didn't ask you anything about yourself.
It's not about me.
I just feel like I've been talking about myself the whole time here.
Yeah, that's what it's about. Yeah.
No, it's a joy to be called to serve the Lord. I think we're all called in some way. And I think the one thing that is always interesting for me is, as a mom of 7 children who are all still at home right now, I will add, there is that always that question of balance and life, work-life balance. That has been really the last several years of my life. I spent a lot of time pondering this. Like, is this where you should be? And a few sister saints have kind of come into my prayer life that have offered me some sort of, consolation or direction. And one of them is Saint Joan of Arc. She's become a really good friend of mine. Another is Saint Teresa Lisieux. And then also Saint Teresa's mother, Zélie. And so the businesswoman of Zélie with all the children has always been kind of an interesting one to me. But recognizing the unique charisms of every individual person and the gifts, and how there's an obligation to really become that person that God made you to be. And that when you don't do it, it's almost miserable. And so this has been just an interesting moment for me of saying, you may have a lot going on and it may not seem to make sense, but if it's your charism, if it's your gift, it sort of just happens.
Yeah.
God blesses it.
Yeah. God gave it to you for others. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's exactly the point. It's not about me. It's for others. And this is for our culture. It's for our world. It's for women.
Yeah. Yeah. Amen. Well, thank you for responding to the Holy Spirit and all the work that you're doing. You're making eternal differences. So
thank you for helping to get the word out. We need all the help we can get at this time.
Absolutely. All right. So we'll close it out there. Thank you for joining us today's episode of the Vocational Business Leader Podcast. We hope you found inspiration as we explore the powerful union of faith and business. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe, share it, leave a review. Your support helps us. May God guide your work, and may God bless you. See you next time.